Howdy. With this video, I want to go over the third essay, the poetry essay, the one everybody just looks forward to all semester. Doing this video on Friday, April 6th. To go over the schedule, hopefully by now you've turned in essay number 2, and you're turning in that sonnet for response number 9, or should actually show to be in the Dropbox, but still need to turn it in. Make sure you get it in there. For Monday, April 9th, nothing's actually due. But you should be working on the essay. You got to read through a short lecture, watch a few videos, read through the essay assignment, pick your poem you want to work with. It's going to take a little bit of work there. For next Thursday, I want to see the first 2 paragraphs of your essay. This should show me that you're on the right track and you know what you're doing, or it may show me you're not quite sure what you're doing and you might need a little help. That's pretty normal. Also, don't forget you have to go see the Never-Ending Story. That's the final exam is going to be based on that performance. That starts next Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 7:30, and Sunday at 2 o'clock. You get a free ticket. All you have to do is go to the box office and make sure you have your 900 number, your student ID number, or your student ID even, and you'll get a free ticket. If you take somebody else, they'll have to pay. It's a good show for kids. It's going to be about an hour, hour and 10 minutes, no intermission, so something kids should be able to sit through and hopefully enjoy. Um, Monday the 16th, the final version of essay 3 is number due. Like with the other essays, if you need another day, I'm not going to be too picky about that. I'm not going to be sitting up there at 11:59 on Monday the 16th waiting for your essay. I will assign the final exam at that time. Nothing will be due on Thursday the 19th. We should be working on the final. That final exam is due on Monday. And that's pretty much it for the class. Response number 10 will be a review of the course. It won't be anything you have to read or study for. Then you're just pretty much waiting for me to get everything graded and back to you and make sure your grade looks right. So basically about 3 weeks left in the course, plus that final exams week where we don't have a final exam. So hopefully it's feeling a little bit downhill. If you kind of get stuck on this poetry essay, let me know pretty quick because we only have 3 weeks. That's kind of the good news and bad news there. Excuse me. For the poetry essay assignment, all this material's right here where it says material for essay number 3 on the poetry. The first thing I'm asking you to do is kind of look through the study notes for the poetry essay. What this does, it kind of takes you through open forms of poetry, unrhymed, unmetered, which can be sometimes kind of difficult because, how do you know it's a poem if there's no rhyme or meter? But hopefully you're going to start getting tuned into that. And the study notes, they have about 20 minutes of videos. I want you to kind of listen to poets reading their own poems and see how they do it. If you just kind of read a poem like blah, 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 that's a stupid poem, then yeah, it's probably going to be a stupid poem. Maybe not because of the poem, but because of the way you read it. And I kind of want you to let the poets do some of the work here, right? Kind of try and enjoy it. I mean, some poems you may not like, and you're just like, well, okay, I tried it, and move on with your life. Not a particularly long list, but some really good poems here. And generally what I've done is I've given you the links to the poems, and then generally I've tried to give you a link to the poet reading the poem. And pretty much all of these have the poet reading the poems there. So these poems are also in our book, at least most of them are. But I thought it'd be easy if you had the links where you can just click and click and not have to go back to your book all the time. But if you like reading out of the book, that's fine. But you're going to start with Allen Ginsberg, go through Marge Piercy and Sylvia Plath. Some very different poets that you're going to get here as well. Some nice poems by Lucille Clifton. One thing Clifton wanted to do is give voice to unspoken things, and you're going to see her doing that. And Clifton's one of the better poets of the last 50 years, so hopefully you enjoy her poetry. And Billy Collins, another famous modern poet. The nice thing about famous modern poets is generally they're out there on YouTube, and we can watch them read their poems. And then we're going to end with Bob Dylan, who recently won the Nobel Prize. So, but hopefully it'll kind of take you through a discussion of poetry. You kind of get your ear kind of tuned about how poetry should be read. So when you start reading the poetry essay assignment, it'll start making a little sense to you. Make that big. Whoops, way too big. For the poetry essay assignment, so the study notes kind of help you get started there, right? Because most of us don't sit around thinking, I need to read about poetry today. It's something you got to kind of let yourself fall into a bit. For the poetry essay assignment, you got a choice between 8 poems. And you're going to do an explication of one of the poems, and I'll talk about that here in a second. You're only going to pick one poem, and you're going to take this line by line or stanza by stanza. Stanzas are groups of lines within a poem. I'll show you that here in a second. But it's going to be your informed response to the poem. So basically, it's reader response, but you're a reader, an educated reader who's taken Comp 2 all semester. So hopefully, it's a fairly informed response, right? And basically, the way to think of it is you're unfolding the poem. If you're like me, you might like to summarize things, get it all down into two sentences. You want to do the opposite here. You want to kind of take a line and explain what it means and how it's functioning. And this is kind of an important skill set to gain during college. You know, if you're a nurse and some patient gets sick because of something you did, you want to go back and explicate what happened and kind of unfold it to make sure you don't make that mistake again, right? And you may be asked to write it all down, and you basically be explicating the things you did before to lead to that problem. Hopefully that never happens to you, but you'd be surprised if you go to fire somebody, you only got to write it out, right? And explain what in detail why that person needs to be fired. So it's kind of an interesting skill set, and it's not always easy either. But anyway, the explication, no biography, no research. Not You might be able to do a little bit of biography on some of these, but don't do that. I don't care that William Carlos Williams was born in New Jersey and was a doctor and blah blah blah. Just not relevant to what you're doing in this essay. And you can kind of see there. You start doing that, it's going to get a 0 pretty quick. Make sure you have all the punctuation. I'll do another video with all the, going over all these terms. Some of these you're probably pretty familiar with. Maybe a couple you're not. No it or you. It's a pretty short assignment sheet there, right? But you're gonna pick one of these poems. Damp, Virginia. Damp, Virginia is a coal mining town in Southwest Virginia. Some of you might know where that is. That's a poem about what's going on in that town there. A Woman with Black Balloons, an interesting poem by Jan Wagner. Kind of comparing the balloons to life and death, and very interesting poem. Not an easy poem. The Dog at Night, another one by Jan Wagner. It's a very interesting poem. I'll be interesting to see it. If you pick this, what you come up with. But you're going to see different types of poems. They're all going to be open form. That's why I want you to go through those study notes. But when I talk about going stanza by stanza, talking about these groups of lines. Each one of these is a stanza. The Dog at Night. Then we got numerology, about turning 7 as a young person and how fun it is. The Descent, very ambiguous poem by William Carlos Williams, fairly famous poet. I've always gotten good essays on this, but if you read this poem, it just kind of goes over your head. You might choose another one, or you might get into it and say, like, what's going on here? And kind of that's what an explanation kind of does. You kind of get in and say, here's what I think is going on in this poem, and you're going to use short quotes to support what you're saying. So if you kind of say the Descent's obviously about Obamacare, I'm going to be like, whoa, Obama wasn't born when this. I don't think he was when this poem was written. How are you going to get there using short quotes and support from the poem? This be the simile. Philip Larkin's a famous poet. This is poems in response to one of his poems. Kind of interesting metaphor there, or simile going on in the poem. Demolition Derby by Sherman Pearl. He tends to write about his relationship with his son, or at least a persona's relationship with his or her son. Talking about Demolition Derby and human relationships. Basic Training is another good poem. It starts out kind of talking about basic training in the Army or the Marines or whatever. Then all of a sudden, it starts turning into something different. And that's kind of what you got to determine as you're doing the explication. So you're going to pick one of those 8 poems. Hopefully one you'll kind of like, or at least one will be less painful than the others. And you're going to go line by line or stanza by stanza. Generally, I recommend stanza by stanza. That way you can spend a paragraph on each stanza. And it's pretty easy to figure out how you're going to organize your essay doing that. All right. There's a sheet on there about how to write a good poetry explication. Some of this is pretty obvious. You want to kind of carefully read the poem you've chosen. Don't just, blah, 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 blah. You're not going to get much out of it. You want to slow down, read it out loud. Try and find the rhythm within it, like you're going to see the poets do with those study notes. You might want to end up printing off the poem and making comments in the margin. But some words you may not understand, like Oomphaloos and the Woman with Black Balloons. I had to look that up myself. I didn't know that meant belly buttons. So, but with an explication, you're not going to have an introduction or a conclusion paragraph. You want to start with the first line and get straight into the poem. So if you start your essay with, since the dawn of history, poetry is blah, blah, I'm going to be stop. No. In line 1 of this person's poem, this is what starts happening. And same thing with the conclusion. You want to end with the last line. You don't want to go back and restate everything you just said to pad your word count or something like that. You want to kind of go through the poem in a straight line. Start from line 1, go to the last line. You may go from, again, stanza by stanza. Either way is fine. Again, stanza by stanza generally works better. Don't skip sections because you don't understand it. Get in there and kind of work through that ambiguity and try and show us what you're seeing there. The rest of this is already in the assignment sheet. This is a big one. Make sure you're using frequent short quotes. That keeps us focused on where you're getting your ideas from. I've had some very interesting interpretations of some of these poems. But if you can, the better you can support it with short quotes and show us where you're getting your ideas, the better the explication is going to be. Again, if you start saying this one poem's obviously about Donald Trump's campaign for president, I'm going to be like, no, it's not. They're all written before he ran for president. So how are you going to do that? Something on my screen there. But again, frequent short quotes. I'm going to show you an example here. You can kind of venture off into certain areas, but make sure you bring it back to the poem. It's not just about you and then talking about your cat throwing up on the rug or something. Stay focused on the poem and your response to it. Make sure you introduce and comment on all quotes. Don't put a quote on there and assume the reader's saying what you're saying. Don't assume the reader's seeing what you're seeing. You want to get in there and explain what you're saying. Again, and no concluding paragraph. But that's basically how an explication works. Here's an example of one. Hopefully you've read The Road Not Taken at some point in your life. If not, you might want to, before you get all the way into this sample essay, you might want to read it in your book or watch it on YouTube, either way. Fairly famous poem. Would be kind of odd if you haven't read it yet, but you never know. But again, I don't have any water. With an explication, you're going to start with the first line of the first stanza. No introduction paragraph, no biography on Robert Frost and how he won the Nobel Prize or whatever. It's just not interesting to us in terms of this explication. You want to focus on the poem and take us through the poem. So in the first stanza of his poem, The Road Not Taken, Robert Frost presents a scene familiar to all people through the persona of a traveler. I have the literary terms bolded here just for convenience. You don't have to do that in your essay. And when you use these terms, you don't have to define them in your essay, but you should use them properly. And again, I'll do a video on those in a different video. Our traveler uses first-person narration to present us with the metaphor of two roads diverging in a yellow wood. You're going to notice pretty quickly brackets that show a change to a quote are going to be your friends because for the quote has to make grammatical sense with the introduction, and you're going to have to change some words to do that a little bit. But a metaphor comparing two unlike things without using like or as. And the two roads, we all kind of hit those places in our life where we have to choose one road or the other, and you take the road and you can't take the other one. When you chose a major here at college, you chose a road, right? You have too many roads diverging, you have to choose one of them. But it's a metaphor that represents the proverbial fork in the road we all encounter when making a life decision. In lines 2 and 3, we find our traveler must make a choice and cannot remain static. Again, you're going to notice you're going to cite using line number. You can do that like this in a citation, or you can do it in the introduction to the quote. It's good to kind of vary that up a little bit so you're not falling into a pattern. We find the traveler must make a choice and cannot remain static. I cannot travel both and be one traveler. If you end the quote before the end of the line, you want to get those ellipses in there showing the omission. But as you can see, the writer here is using frequent short quotes to keep us focused on where he's getting his ideas from. Then he's going to kind of talk about this for a little bit. The persona's point suggests that even if we decide not to choose, we're still heading down a path. If we choose not to marry, we have made a choice. If we choose not to have children, we have made a choice. And again, kind of pointing out that these are choices you may not be able to come back to, right? Any life traveler must move forward in some direction. In addition, the narrator's observation of the color yellow for the wood indicates that the traveler encountering this decision must use caution. If you see a color in a poem like black balloons, you need to talk about that color. If you haven't turned 40 or 50, you may not have black balloons at your birthday, and it's because black balloons kind of indicate death, but kind of in a humorous way when you start hitting 40 or 50, or hopefully not too much older than that, or it gets a little dark there. That's kind of how it's going to work. You're going to start with the first lines, start taking us through line by line through the poem. One reason these poems I pick fairly short poems is so that you will go line by line to make the word count. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but notice it's going to spend a little bit of time on the color yellow and what it means. He's going to spend a paragraph on each stanza and kind of show just a reader a response to this, the poem "The Road Not Taken." And again, you can see lots of short quotes. Make sure you're citing using line number. Basically, you don't really want to skip too many lines in a poem, or you're going to lose the reader a little bit. Again, brackets are going to be your friend here. Also, one thing I didn't point out, when you go from one line to the next in a short quote, you want to use the slash. In that study notes for the poetry, it shows you how to do long quotes as well. But kind of one reason we've been kind of forcing maybe the ellipses and brackets in there a little bit, so when you get to this essay, you're pretty comfortable with them. If it's a published poem, you want to put that on the works cited page. We'll show you how to do that once you get the drafts going and everything. But that's kind of how an explication works. There's no concluding paragraph. There's no introduction paragraph. Start with the first line, end with the last line, and make sure you're unfolding the poem and showing us your response to it. But again, all this is on the material for Essay 3 area there. So kind of a little bit of reading to go through, not a ton, but enough to keep you busy. Those study notes, I can't. There's no way I'm going to be able to know if you did it or not, other than the quality of your explication. But I strongly encourage you to go through those. And again, listen to how those poets read the poems and kind of work their way through it, and hopefully it'll help you get ready for the poetry essay assignment. Because you do have to kind of go through all 8 of those poems to decide which one you want to do. Now, if you're reading kind of like the poets are in the study notes, or the videos for the study notes might help you out quite a bit. But I'm going to hush up there. That sounds like plenty of information. If you have questions, be sure to let me know, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.